The ancient Maya, one of the greatest civilizations in human history. Beneath the forests of Mexico and Central America lie the secrets of a sophisticated society that endured longer than the Roman Empire.
You're not supposed to have giant cities in a tropical forest.
For decades, archaeologists focused on the end of the ancient Maya.
Most Maya kingdoms were simply abandoned to the forest.
But the start of Maya society holds as many mysteries as its fall.
When do we start seeing Maya civilization? And that's a complex question.
Now, a new discovery is blowing apart long-held beliefs about the earliest Maya.
It would accommodate thousands, if not 10,000s of people.
A record-breaking monument has been found.
It's enormous. This is the most important finding in my career.
Hidden treasures unearthed.
And who's the lucky one?
And ancient skeletons exhumed.
This is the earliest dedicated burial ground that we know of in Central America.
Shedding new light on a lost and ancient world.
It flips everything that we assumed.
And exposing long-lost secrets about the origin of the Maya civilization. Hidden beneath dense forests lie the ruins of an ancient civilization, the lost world of the Maya. The Maya constructed towering pyramids, lavish temples, and vast cities. They developed writing and mastered astronomy.
It was a world of mythology. It was a world of religion.
The civilization occupied a Maya region that stretched from the south of modern-day Mexico into Belize, Guatemala, and beyond. They were united by belief and ritual, but never a single ruler or language. Today, much of what we know about the ancient Maya comes from the so-called Golden Age. The classic period between about 250 and 900 AD, when many great city-states flourished. But it's around 400 or 500 BC that the hallmarks of a true civilization appeared.
We see a lot of growth. We see towns and large cities being built in numerous locations. We see roads, we see giant agricultural terraces, we see new forms of artwork, we see writing.
Writing is a huge development in any civilization, in any era of the world.
If they had any writing before 400 or 500 BC, it has not survived, and they don't seem to have had much use of it.
The big mystery is what happened before these developments. What is the origin of the Maya as a civilization? Now, an archaeological breakthrough could answer these questions. A new discovery has been made on the western edge of the Maya region, in the Mexican state of Tabasco, at a site known as Aguada Fénix. Daniela Triadan leads a team of archaeologists from the University of Arizona. They thought this relatively unstudied landscape might hide undiscovered clues about the origin of the Maya. And their hunch paid off. Beneath the trees and farms of this area is something remarkable. A structure so immense that it had hidden in plain sight.
It is such a big scale that when you walk over the surface, it looks like a natural landscape. And all of this that we're standing on, that we're seeing here, is artificial. It is just unbelievable.
From the air, thick vegetation obscures the true shape of what's here. But a powerful technology called LiDAR lets the team peer beneath the trees. The system fires laser pulses from an airplane to the ground, which pass through small gaps in the foliage and bounce back, generating precise three-dimensional maps of the land beneath. At a lab near Aguada Fénix, the team's co-leader, Takeshi Inomata, uses LiDAR images to examine the site.
If you want to make detailed map, you spend couple of years and then cover only 1 square kilometer. But now with LiDAR, you can cover the area 1,000 times wider in just a few days.
The results expose something astonishing. An immense raised area with edges too regular and straight to be natural.
There's something enormous, very important site that nobody knew about before. That was a big surprise for us.
This mysterious structure is almost 1.5 kilometers long and 400 meters wide. It's a giant raised platform larger than 85 football fields.
So this is the main rectangular platform of Aguada Fénix. This is a very well-designed, intentional construction.
Nobody knew that this landscape is artificial until we had the high-resolution LiDAR. I'm standing on one edge of the platform and I can actually see the other one, and the distance is unbelievable. And all of it was built by people.
Now the team need to figure out exactly what they've found. At the center of the platform, they're excavating directly into the structure.
We need to clear this place, clean it further.
By stripping away the soil, layer by layer, they hunt for clues about the monument's construction. Their findings confirm that this is no natural feature.
So we see the series of constructions. You have this field with red soil and then covered by this white floor. So we reconstruct this sequence.
This entire platform was formed from layers of earth, carefully stacked by human hand to a height of 10 to 15 meters. The team have discovered something truly remarkable. It's an ancient monument larger by volume than anything ever found in the Maya region before. Formed from some 4 million cubic meters of earth, a volume larger than Egypt's Great Pyramid. When it was finished, this artificial plateau must have dominated the landscape.
This whole construction had several construction episodes and was built directly on the bedrock.
The platform has built-in access ramps, 4 in total, forming gentle sloping paths to the top. This mysterious monument was built for something important. But what?
You could probably spend decades working at the site. So what we have been trying to do is we have been trying to strategically excavate to get the most information or the most important information at the beginning.
And the first piece of information to figure out that will help answer how Aguada Fénix fits into our current knowledge of the Maya is when this platform was built. There are no inscriptions or writing that might contain a date anywhere to be found. So the team need to carefully hunt for organic material that can be dated. And at the heart of the platform, they uncover a clue that may prove decisive to their investigation.
Carbon.
This piece of charcoal is the burnt residue of organic matter. By measuring the ratio of radioactive and stable carbon isotopes, archaeologists can determine the age.
This is the most important thing we're looking for, because it is the key to giving a date to the elements we have here.
When the team analyze pieces of charcoal found deep within the structure, they discover something that will transform everything they thought they knew about the people of the Maya region. That ancient builders began constructing Aguada Fénix around 1100 BC and continued to build at the site until 800 BC. This is not only the largest ancient monument ever unearthed in the Maya region, but also the oldest. Now the team has a real mystery to solve. Was Aguada Fénix built by the earliest Maya? Archaeologists traditionally thought that the development of Maya civilization was gradual, with small villages beginning to emerge between 1000 to 350 BC, and the population becoming increasingly settled, culminating in the huge monuments the Maya would become famous for. Aguada Fénix turns that idea on its head.
Certainly, this is the most important finding in my career. It has really a huge implication for the understanding of development of Maya civilization.
Takeshi and Daniela need to hunt for more clues that might prove a link to the Maya. They want to know what it was used for and how it was built. Ancient builders of the giant platform at Aguada Fénix assembled it in layers using clay and earth.
We see that the construction happened over various episodes. They built one version, then years later, they came back and then did another version of construction on top of the earlier one.
So where did the construction material come from? Daniela has uncovered evidence that suggests the builders didn't have to travel far.
So here we're on the southern part of the platform. You see the slope, and that's the actual edge of the platform. We have these type of holes all around Aguada Fénix, and we think those are the burrow pits that they used for the soils to actually construct the big platform.
There were no pack animals or carts at the time, so everything had to be moved on foot.
People were taking soil from their various places, but a relatively nearby area, and then brought into this platform and then put this soil there.
The discovery allows investigators to build a picture of what the construction must have looked like. And it was immense. The builders of Aguada Fénix needed to move some 4 million cubic meters of earth. A task that took 10 to 13 million days of the builders' work. And that was completed in some 200 years. The construction of Aguada Fénix from Earth might seem simple, but new evidence to the north of the site suggests that the people who built this platform were sophisticated engineers. Takeshi's team has unearthed a mysterious stone structure. It's a dike built to control water and the remains of a canal.
This is probably the dike that the ancient people built. And then this may have been the canal where water can run out. Then in here we found white material, which makes a nice living or working surface. On top of it, they built this dike with stones and soil mixed.
The discovery shows that the builders of Aguada Fénix had a sophisticated knowledge of hydraulic engineering.
Possibly they may have had some kind of arrangement to adjust the water level. Some cases they may let the water flow from here, or some cases they may stop the water to control the water level.
This new find shows that the builders could modify the landscape around their giant platform. They might have used the dike to control the flow of rain or floodwater, artificially raising the level of a natural lake beside their immense monument, perhaps to ensure a steady supply of water or even for symbolic reasons.
This water management work itself was probably pretty substantial work. And then probably they shaped this shore of the lake, made it in a straight line over their southern part, and then the other side, they made a pretty elaborate waterfront area with straight shore.
The discovery is evidence of the sophistication and engineering knowledge of the ancient builders of Aguada Fénix. Now, a find at the platform itself suggests that it was built using a surprising method. Digging 2.5 meters below the surface, archaeologist Maria Belén Mendez has unearthed something strange.
I have never seen this kind of organized and systematized filling.
Materials of different colors and a collection of lighter colored rocks that resemble a wall.
This layer of stones holds back the earth of this color so that it's not confused with the earth on the other side. So it's like a separation that divides people's work. On this side, a group of people probably fill with one color, and on the other side, other people fill with another color. They make this wall so that the colors don't mix.
The builders of Aguada Fénix formed tens of thousands of cells, measuring 1 to 2 meters wide and up to 1 meter deep. Then they filled the center of each with earth in shades of green, blue, red, and black.
People are clearly laying down these different colors in their own cell, and they have their own preferences. And I think what it means is that each of these cells represents a group of people, and it's their part of the construction that they're contributing to.
But surprisingly, once completed, builders hid their immense checkerboard with a thick layer of white earth.
So that tells us that it's not just the final product. How they made it must have had a symbolic ritual significance for those people.
It's an important clue, suggesting this was a ceremonial site that brought people together for its construction. And now the team has discovered why it was built. When Takeshi examined the LiDAR scans of Aguada Fénix, he spotted something astonishing. Pyramid-like structures on a platform extending from the side of the monument. What did the ancient people use them for? And is there a link to the Maya civilization? The mysterious pyramid-like mounds that Takeshi discovered are covered in thick forest today.
We are on top of the western pyramid or mound. From the center line of this mound to the center of the eastern mound seems to have very intentional alignment.
Takeshi thinks these two mounds were assembled by the ancient builders of Aguada Fénix for a very special ritual. It's a layout known as an astronomical complex, or E-group. The higher mound in the west allowed ancient astronomers to observe the sunrise compared to the mound directly to its east. The technique allowed these people to calculate precise dates in the year. Aguada Fénix was built as a ceremonial gathering place.
So sun rises in this direction on February 24th. Then it comes back and rises on this direction on October 17th. Interestingly, the interval between October 17th and February 24th is 130 days. That's very significant number. 130 is half of 260-day calendar.
Takeshi has uncovered a vital clue that links this site with the great Maya civilization. The Maya used a calendar called the Sacred Round to track important activities related to the gods. It was formed of 260 days. 260 was a combination of the numbers 1 to 13, coupled with 20 different day names.
We have 20 digits, right? We have 10 fingers and 10 toes. So the number 20 comes directly out of the human body. Their cosmos was a mirror image in some ways of the human body. So this is a fundamental kind of template that they use in their numerology, in their calendar, and in the structure of the cosmology in general.
So we think these ceremonies were certainly dedicated to the sun, but also with the growing season for maize. So it's a whole complex, I think, that speaks to these ceremonies having to do with agriculture, with the organization of the cosmos, and the time and the calendar.
Throughout the history of the ancient Maya, astronomical complexes were central to ceremonial sites they built. And Aguada Fénix is the oldest such complex in the entire Maya region. The discovery suggests that Aguada Fénix was an open-air temple, an immense sanctuary and meeting place, a place of pilgrimage that hosted huge ceremonies, just as the Maya would do at the height of their civilization. Pilgrims access the platform via 4 giant ramps located at its ends. Each one is 120 meters long and 50 meters wide.
Here you could have probably 10 people go next to each other up this ramp. And we think the northern part and the southern part, this is how people potentially ceremonially accessed the big platforms.
The 560,000 square meters of the platform allowed a huge number of people to gather.
But if you just look at the dimensions of it, it would accommodate thousands, if not 10,000s of people.
But the team have found no evidence that these people lived at Aguada Fénix in a city.
There were different kinds of people gathering here. Some people are more mobile, coming from distant places, and some of them may have been a ritual specialist who did mainly the solar observation, organization of ritual.
Now, a remarkable discovery is exposing one of these people. The tropical environment here means that organic matter doesn't preserve well, making a discovery to the northeast of the platform very exciting. The skeletal remains of a 3,000-year-old person.
He was buried in a sitting position. His legs and knees like this kind of position.
Examining the bones reveal they're from an adult man who carried out physical labor.
He had some pattern of bone which indicate that he did a very hard physical work, including carrying a heavy load using a band put on the forehead and then carry the heavy load in the back. One possibility was he was one of the workers who built the platform.
Takeshi's team found evidence of this man's diet by analyzing his teeth.
That this person ate relatively good amount of maize. So some people may have been adapting a more sedentary way of life with more maize consumption. So we are seeing that change in the lifestyle. Before 1100 BC, many people are probably mobile because they didn't build substantial residential structures. They were moving by season, and probably they were in a transitional stage.
The discovery suggests that the people who built Aguada Fénix were beginning to settle and become more sedentary agriculturists. Could they have planted the seeds for the Maya civilization? The team need to find more evidence. At the heart of the astronomical E-group complex, the team dig on the center line between the pyramid bounds. This is where archaeologists have found buried artifacts at other ancient sites, and they're about to strike lucky. Claudia Alvarado is in charge of the excavation, and her team has unearthed an unusual green stone.
This is where they found it.
Just below? And who's the lucky one?
It's a jade stone, the most precious and sacred in the Maya region. And it must have been placed here intentionally.
It doesn't come from here. In any case, it's not its natural place.
The team record the exact location and orientation of the stone before removing the precious clue.
We will dip the ground to see if we find more of these stones.
The discovery of jade at Aguada Fénix is more evidence of a link to the Maya. Green jadestone was highly prized by the civilization. They used it in funerary masks and other ritual objects.
There are sources of jade in the Mexican side of the Maya region, but a lot of the finer jade came from the other side of the Maya lowlands. Jade was used mostly for ritual purposes.
It was a rare material, so it was something that was hard to get. It was also physically hard. It was very hard to carve. It was so durable. It was so lasting.
At Aguada Fénix, the team want to find out what the builders used jade for.
The piece is clean, Takeshi.
Very good. Let's take a look.
It looks more polished on one side.
Yes, it's polished on this side.
Takeshi's team has found other polished jade stones too, including axe heads.
If we see those stones, they are not standardized. Many different shapes and then different color. So that means that they obtained those individual pieces through different connection. And then for the big ceremony, they put them together and then deposited them.
One piece of jade has been carved into a tool of some sort.
This part is broken, but originally it must have had a pointed edge, probably used for blood-letting ritual. In case of male, they pierce the male organ. In case of female, they pierce the tongue.
The practice of bloodletting, a kind of self-sacrifice, was an important ritual in the Maya world. It was sometimes performed by rulers in public as a way of demonstrating their connection with the sacred world. Bloodletting and jade objects, alongside the sophisticated mystical calendar and tracking of the sun, offer further evidence of a link between Aguada Fénix and the Maya. But these cultural ideas were also common amongst other ancient societies who existed in this part of the Americas. Now, a new find will offer a more direct link. Near the jadestone cache, the team find a series of ceramic bowls and pots.
This is the first big discovery we've made.
Daniela has the task of piecing them back together.
It's like a 3D puzzle, difficult puzzle. These are mostly jars and relatively rare, and we think at Aguada Fénix they may actually have been used for feasting.
Ceramics are a crucial part of any archaeologist's investigation because styles, techniques, and materials can be traced to individual regions or people. And Daniela sees a link to an ancient Maya city called Ceibal, the oldest currently known.
At that time, if we look at the whole Maya area, we have very localized traditions in ceramics. But the Aguada Fénix ceramics look like Ceibal ceramics. I think these people are very closely related.
Could Aguada Fénix and Ceibal have been built by the same people? Ceibal is located 180 kilometers away from Aguada Fénix, in Guatemala. Both sites are connected by the mighty Usumacinta River and its tributaries. Archaeologist Melissa Burham studies the origin of the Maya civilization. The ancient city of Ceibal mostly lies in ruins amongst the jungle. It's an important site for understanding the birth of the Maya, because it's one of the earliest and longest-lasting Maya cities.
We don't know how many people lived here, maybe 10,000 to 60,000 people. It is a really large city. So here in the very center thousands, but then in the greater area, tens of thousands of people too.
Excavations carried out over more than 10 years have revealed structures remarkably similar to those found at Aguada Fénix.
The most surprising thing about Ceibal itself is that this area that we are on right here is actually on this very large platform. So before, we thought it was just a natural rise. We didn't realize that it was actually very square, like you can see right here. This was definitely modified by people to look like a square, which is similar in a sense to Aguada Fénix.
The prominent stone monuments of Ceibal were built centuries after Aguada Fénix, including a grand pyramid of which only a few stones remain. The pyramid once stood 28 meters tall, but it's what archaeologists discover below that surprises them. A few meters below ground, they find a 2-meter-tall pyramid-like structure on a wide platform. It appears to be an astronomical complex laid out just like the E group at Aguada Fénix, and it dates to 950 BC. It's the oldest structure at Ceibal, built little more than 100 years after the giant platform at Aguada Fénix was started.
We have X caches all the way along the central line here, very, very similar to what we see at Aguada Fénix.
The similarities between Aguada Fénix and this earliest occupation of Ceibal are clear, and a grisly discovery suggests how they are connected. Melissa and her team unearthed an ancient necropolis in this clearing within one of the earliest Maya cities, Ceibal.
So here is where we excavated in this area right here. It was about 4 by 4 meters. And we kept expanding because we kept finding the burials. And it's only about a meter and a half down under our feet where we're at, and they are just everywhere.
They eventually exhume 13 skeletons of men, women, and children.
It is like this place was used specifically as a cemetery, as a burial ground, which is a totally unique, different practice that we didn't know about. And this is also the earliest dedicated burial ground that we know of in Central America.
Could these bones prove a link between Ceibal and Aguada Fénix? The team send the ancestral remains to Guatemala City for further investigation. Juan Manuel Palomo specializes in the study of bones. The hard enamel of teeth captures tiny isotopic markers that can be used to decipher where a person lived, and even if they migrated to a new location.
This individual was born in the Ceibal region, and when we look at the data from his third molar, it falls perfectly in the local area of Ceibal. So this individual spent his early adult years, and obviously died, in the Ceibal region.
But 3 skeletons have markers that show they grew up away from Ceibal.
For these individuals, the strontium isotopes suggest that they were migrants.
Our hypothesis is basically that when the E group was made, like 950 BC, a group of people might have introduced these ideas from the Aguada Fénix area about ritual, about cosmology.
The link between Aguada Fénix and Ceibal is a vital clue. Archaeological work at Ceibal shows occupation of the site from 950 BC until after the end of the Maya Golden Age, 2,000 years later. For Daniela, back at Aguada Fénix, Ceibal helps tackle the question of whether the builders of the giant platform are ancestors of the Maya.
The whole research is about basically when Maya people become what we would recognize as Maya people. And when is this happening and how is this happening? And Ceibal, where we have an E group at 950, and nobody would have a problem calling these people ancestors of Maya. We just happen to be 180 kilometers to the west of it. But if I look at the materiality of what's going on, I have no problem in putting these people into the same kind of cultural sphere.
The evidence suggests that we may not be able to call the builders of Aguada Fénix Maya, but that they probably laid the groundwork for the great civilization. Now archaeologists are uncovering clues about a link between Aguada Fénix and another ancient civilization. The evidence lies 380 kilometers west, in the Mexican state of Veracruz, at an ancient site called San Lorenzo. It was in these fertile plains that a powerful civilization called the Olmec developed and thrived. The Olmec first appeared around 1500 BC, 400 years before Aguada Fénix was started. They are the oldest civilization in this part of the Americas.
Olmec culture is one of the early kind of moments where we definitively say, okay, this is a pattern of shared beliefs and practices where it's recognizably a cultural phenomenon.
This is where I think we see some of the earliest architecture and sculpture that is reflecting a mindset and an idea of culture that later civilizations grow out of.
The remains of the Olmec city, known as San Lorenzo, are buried beneath a wide plateau. Archaeologist Virginia Arrieta Baizabal studies this long-lost culture.
So this was the first capital of the Olmecs, one of the first capitals of the world. There were many people, many houses, many buildings. It's a bit like going to the capital today, to Mexico City.
This landscape once looked very different. The Olmec built San Lorenzo on naturally high ground, which they artificially leveled and shaped using an estimated 8 million cubic meters of fill. The platform towers 70 meters above the plains, protecting their capital city from floods during the rainy season.
We calculated that it took 14 to 18 million working hours. Construction only took place during 3 or 4 months a year, during the dry season. So it was periodic work that required a lot of organization, a lot of people, and a lot of effort.
The Olmec appear to have had similar ideas to Aguada Fénix's builders. Aguada Fénix was built long after San Lorenzo, and Takeshi has found a link between the two. This breakthrough came from examining LiDAR scans.
San Lorenzo also had a very enormous artificial plateau. In this image, you see that this very straight line. On the other side, it's a little bit subtle, but you see another straight line. So there was this rectangular space here.
The layout is remarkably similar to Aguada Fénix.
So this image shows Aguada Fénix on this side, San Lorenzo on this side. Both of them have 20-edge platforms, and then both of them have this rectangular plaza space. And then on top of it, Aguada Fénix has 2 causeways from the south. San Lorenzo also probably had 2 access ways from the south. So I think that the Aguada Fénix followed the format developed originally at San Lorenzo.
The builders of Aguada Fénix seem to have shared ideas with the city of their neighbors. But how much of the Olmec culture did the builders share? In the mid-1900s, archaeologists excavating at the ancient Olmec city of San Lorenzo make a startling discovery. A series of huge statues, sculpted from basalt boulders that weigh many tons.
They are thought to represent leaders. Why? First of all, because of the cost of transporting this basalt from over 60 kilometers away. This implies that a leader financed this transport. The function of these heads was to legitimize power. We're in front of a leader.
The colossal heads show that Olmec society was highly structured.
It was a highly hierarchical society, a centralized government that had political, economic, religious, and cosmological control and power, capable of governing an entire city of more than 12,000 inhabitants.
So will evidence of the same strong social hierarchy and powerful leaders be found at Aguada Fénix? So far, the team have found no evidence of elite people. To the west of the platform, they do unearth a single statue, however. But this is no king. The statue probably represents a pig-like animal called a white-lipped peccary.
It's a pretty nice sculpture.
Until today, this is the earliest fully sculpted stone piece in what becomes the Maya area.
It was carved about 3,000 years ago from limestone.
So it's relatively naturalistic representation of animal, which is actually very different from Olmec sculpture. So Olmec people emphasize the representation of powerful people. So in this sense, it seems to represent very different concept. So that's one of the reasons that we think that the social organization of Aguada Fénix was different from San Lorenzo.
The findings suggest something surprising. That the immense platform of Aguada Fénix was built in the absence of a central ruler or elites who could control labor and force people to work. A dramatically different organization to the Olmec.
We are seeing enormous construction happening in a very early stage without very developed hierarchical organization.
The groups of semi-nomadic people who decided to build the giant platform at Aguada Fénix weren't settled and unified enough to be called a distinct civilization. But the discoveries here suggest that building this monument lay the groundwork for Maya society.
Often people think that the society developed, then that makes construction. That's partly true, but another important aspect is this kind of building project makes the society. And that's what happened here. Through the process of construction project, they had to develop new form of social organization, new form of division of labor. That possibly led to later Maya society.
Certainly, when we look at the timing, I do think that Aguada Fénix could have been the start or the foundation of what we call later Maya civilization.
This site has transformed archaeologists' understanding of the Maya.
It pushes back the date of the beginning. We might say that the Maya civilization even begins around 1100 BC. I think we need more evidence to say that, but it certainly looks promising.
It's a great expression of how discoveries can be made right where you've been for a long time, and sometimes things are so big or so subtle you just don't see them. The work at Aguada Fénix also really just changes our scope of what is monumental.
Aguada Fénix turns out to be the Maya at their most monumental. So it flips everything that we assumed. It flips this idea that civilization is this gradual growth from nothing.
From the astronomical E-group complex for observing the sun and marking the passing of time, to the jade treasures, ceramics, and skeletons, all the evidence points towards a time when there was a huge amount of movement amongst people in the Maya area and links with neighboring cultures like the Olmec. A massive flow of ideas and coming together of people that would be the foundation of Maya civilization. In the forests of southern Mexico and Central America lies the territory of the ancient Maya, a civilization that was formed well before the Roman Empire existed and persisted much longer. The Maya have been studied intensively, exposing the secrets of the society's heyday and unmasking the semi-nomadic people who lived before the Maya. But the events that would transform these people into a true civilization remain a mystery.
When do the Maya become Maya? That's a good question.
Now, archaeological discoveries are shedding new light on this important moment in Maya history.
This would be almost like a social reactor.
We have a very complex story here of the growth and development of Maya civilization.
Investigators are exposing the key stages that led to the civilization's formation, using the latest technology to discover new monuments.
Pyramid to our right, and another pyramid over here.
And re-examining ancient sites to discover the origin of Maya identity.
It's probably the biggest pyramidal structure in all Central America.
From the technological secrets of their colossal architecture to the emergence of a social elite.
That's a huge moment in history.
And development of writing.
There are 3,400 pieces in this puzzle.
The history of the Maya is being traced back to its very start.
What we have are all of the major elements that then become classic Maya civilization.
Transforming long-held beliefs about the start of the Maya civilization. The Maya were a people renowned for their vast stone pyramids, elaborate art and culture, and their sophisticated writing and understanding of astronomy. Their territory stretched from the so-called Maya lowlands of southern Mexico and Belize to the highlands of Guatemala and beyond. This is where the famous lost cities are found, and where Maya descendants still thrive today. But despite decades of research, the mystery of how and when the ancient Maya became a true civilization has long puzzled historians. And the riddle has only got more complex with new discoveries. In the Mexican state of Tabasco, archaeologists have unearthed an immense lost monument, a ceremonial platform 1.4 kilometers long and 400 meters wide, known as Aguada Fénix. It's the largest monument in the entire Maya region, and it's also the oldest. Construction probably started around 1100 BC.
The size of Aguada Fénix is very surprising because the early site that we had up until now, it's much smaller.
The discovery of Aguada Fénix is truly phenomenal. So if you think about the coordination and the hours and days and months and years that would have taken to create such a monumental site.
That tells us a lot about human nature, human capability of organizing themselves. So this is a really exciting time for archaeology, which is showing really a fundamental change in our understanding of development of human society.
Aguada Fénix was built well over 1,000 years before the so-called Classic Age of Maya civilization, during the early pre-Classic era. The people who built Aguada Fénix are thought to be the ancestors of the Maya, but historians don't always label them as the Maya civilization. That's because the builders, around 1000 BC, were missing some key characteristics. There are no traces of permanent cities with monumental stone architecture. There's no evidence of defined social hierarchy, headed by powerful leaders. And there's no sign of writing or other cultural traits that would come to define the Maya. So how did the Maya develop these hallmarks of civilization? And when did it happen? Clues lie 500 kilometers away from Aguada Fénix, in the Mexican state of Yucatan. Beneath its dense forest canopy, Yucatan is home to incredible lost Maya cities, like Chichen Itza, with its immense Temple of Kukulkan. Many of the famous sites in the Yucatan date to the Maya Classic era, and beyond to the arrival of the Spanish on these shores. But recently, archaeologists have begun to suspect that the region holds much older clues.
We used to think that Yucatan was kind of the later part of Maya civilization, but recent archaeology has changed that view. So Yucatan archaeology is fundamental for understanding the beginnings of Maya civilization.
What traces of early Maya life are hidden amongst the jungle here? In the west of Yucatan is an area called the Puc region. Puc means low hills in the local Maya language, Yucatec. Archaeologist Evan Parker is hunting for the small villages where early Maya people began to settle. He discovers his first clue hidden in the thick vegetation.
We see, walking right along here, an alignment of stones. So what we're looking at here is an ancient house. So we have this pretty big stone right here, this stone right here. These are the two corners of this house.
The stones mark out the location of a small hut. The hut's builders laid a floor of hardened earth between the stones. They made a framework using wooden poles. Walls were made from earth, and the roof was thatched. This isn't an isolated hut. It was part of an entire village formed from around 80 similar houses, named today as Paso del Macho.
The buildings didn't look anything like what we had seen at other Puc sites. There were no carved stones, there were no masonry buildings.
But why such differences in structure and material? How old is this village? Evan unearths fragments of pottery nearby that provide the answer. Their form and composition allow him to find a date for when they were made. Paso del Macho expanded rapidly around 600 BC. That's a time during the middle of the pre-classic Maya era, when the civilization was developing.
So there's definitely a population boom that seems to occur beginning around 600 BC. For a long time, we didn't think that there was a middle pre-classic occupation of this region.
Finding such an old settlement here is surprising because the Puc region is one of the more inhospitable areas of the Maya territory. Its land is fertile, but its hilly terrain is formed from porous and fragile limestone soil. So rain that falls in the wet season quickly drains away.
In the Puc region, there are some issues that the ancient Maya would have faced with regards to water use. The Puc is raised up by several hundred meters, which means there is no surface water to be found here.
So how did early Maya settlers find water here? Evan has found clues at an abandoned quarry nearby.
So we can see that this is a natural outcrop of limestone. So most likely what they did was, after utilizing it as a quarry, they laid down either a layer of clay or marl and built a wall surrounding it, so that whenever rain comes, this would fill up with water. This would be an ancient water reservoir. They're still experimenting with hydraulic technology at this point.
The development of water storage techniques and permanent villages are the early stages of Maya civilization. And now a discovery a few kilometers away is uncovering evidence of larger cities. Archaeologist George Bay runs one of the largest excavation sites in the Puc region. He's worked at the ancient city of Kiwik for the last 23 years. Kiwik, like many Maya sites in this region, thrived during the classic era of the Maya.
During the late Classic, the Puc region was intensely occupied. There were hundreds of thousands of people. There were dozens of sites. There were hundreds of villages. And a great deal of wealth was accrued both by people of moderate power and people of great power. So between 800 and 1,000, this was one of the centers of the Maya world.
The ruins of the city of Kiwik are dominated by a large pyramid. And nearby, the remains of a palace. George has dated these two monuments to 650 AD. He wants to understand how Kiwik developed and when it was founded. And when his team search between the two central monuments, they unearth an older structure hidden beneath. The discoveries take them much further back in time than they expected.
This building up here is a late classic structure, probably dating to around 650, 700 AD. But as we continued to excavate the unit, we came down on a fourth floor, which was very exciting because suddenly the ceramics indicated we'd jump back in time for around 600 BC, a huge leap in time.
The deeper George's team digs, the further they travel into the past.
The sixth floor represents the original construction of the Kiwik Plaza. And if you look down here, I'm standing on bedrock.
George's team has unearthed 6 successive stages of construction. Each archaeological layer takes them back several centuries. The lowest one is the oldest, forming a platform, or plaza, 14 meters wide and 1 meter thick. Investigations show the site dates back to at least 900 BC, the early Middle Pre-Classic era, and is home to the oldest ceremonial plaza ever found in the Puk region. Kiwik is 1,500 years older than the remains at the site's surface.
So we now were astounded because Kiwik shows that there was major Middle Preclassic occupation. The Maya had moved deep into the Puk Hills and were building substantial platforms like this. So now we recognize that the Puk region was first occupied as early as 900 BC. And we have a very complex story here of the growth and development of pre-classic Maya civilization.
This settlement might have been one of the first Maya sites in Yucatan, proving the Maya were here and beginning to settle in villages and cities much earlier than archaeologists once believed. Now investigations nearby are uncovering the scale of the settlement across this area. In the forests of Mexico's Yucatan, archaeologist Bill Ringel is looking for evidence of Maya settlements.
So you can see on the GPS pyramid to our right and another pyramid over here, the bigger structures are farther along.
These structures haven't been excavated yet, but are believed to date to between 700 and 450 BC. Today, all that remains visible are piles of stones that were once Maya monuments.
This particular site is right at the edge of a large, what we call a planada, plains, very fertile soil. So this is an excellent place to grow crops. And one reason these people decided to stay here was probably to claim ownership of that area. So we are very interested to see how people dispose themselves across this landscape.
To understand how the first Maya settled in this area, Bill uses LiDAR technology. It's an airborne laser system that scans the ground through the densest vegetation.
If you survey a landscape like this as totally overgrown and you have to cut your way through, it's incredibly laborious. And that's what we can do with LiDAR. We can see the sizes, the extents of entire sites. Just like that, we can do 30, 40 years of work in maybe a couple of days with the LiDAR.
Bill used this technology to scan a large area around the site. And the results expose widespread occupation of the region.
Okay, so this is our original LiDAR sample. It covers about 237 square kilometers. And within that, we have about 75 sites. The red dots are smaller sites, and the red triangles are bigger sites. The blue dots here are reservoirs, which seem to have been at least partially artificial, constructed by humans. The one at Yashholm is almost 300 meters in length. We estimate to be around 21 million liters of water, which could have supported thousands of people for a long period of time.
Bill's discoveries show that early Maya were beginning to settle and farm here on a large scale. The reservoirs were capable of supplying water to thousands of people, city-sized populations. But settlements and cities are only part of the developments needed for a group of people to form a civilization. To become a cohesive society, the Maya would need a shared identity. At a laboratory in the town of Oshkotskab, Evan Parker is investigating artifacts he discovered in the village of Paso del Macho. He's joined by archaeologist George Bay. Some of these offerings are dated as early as 800 BC. The treasures assembled here were ritually deposited in the settlement, offering Evan a clue about the beliefs of these early Maya.
They want to ideologically mark this space. And one way that you can do that is by doing a place-making ceremony. And in this case, they are reenacting the creation of one of the most important deities in Maya religion, and that's the rebirth of the maize god.
The maize god plays a central role in Maya mythology. Maize was key to Maya survival. As long as there was water, the crop grew well in the climate, and crucially, the grains could be stored for many months. An important step in the formation of a civilization, as food security affords a society time to focus on culture and religion. Maize became religiously significant. The Maya believed that the gods created humans from ground maize. The objects here suggest that this creation myth existed among the Maya from early in their civilization's formation.
So this is one of the earliest instances of Maya religion, as we've understood it for a very long time, appearing during the Middle Preclassic.
Right, so it's not just religion, it's a very specific set of ideas associated with Maya religion.
The discovery exposes the spread of religious ideas that would become a central pillar of Maya society. A common link that helps define groups of people as a single civilization. Now, Evan thinks that these artifacts hold clues about where some of these religious ideas might have originated.
So these objects all have drilled holes in them. So you could have run a cord through them, you could have worn them as pendants, you could have worn them on a belt, they could have been displayed at eye level, tied to a post or something like that.
Every one has perforations.
Every single one of these has perforations. If we look at these different objects, we see that they're crafted in a style that has often been described as Olmec. So for example, this piece here is what's been called Olmec blue jade.
It's beautiful.
These are thought to be objects that had been carved in the Olmec area and then moved here.
What's so amazing about it is that these artifacts were brought this great distance. They were interacting directly with people hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
The discovery suggests that these early Maya had contact with the Olmec civilization and shared aspects of their religious beliefs. The Olmec are the oldest society in this part of the Americas, predating the Maya. Now, discoveries at an Olmec stronghold suggest that this civilization shared more than religious beliefs with the Maya. 500 kilometers from the Puc region, in the Mexican state of Tabasco, is La Venta, the most prominent Olmec city of its time. Archaeologist Rebecca Lork has been studying this area for almost 40 years.
La Venta was definitely a very important city for its time in the first millennium before Christ. It was a city that had no comparison. People would come to see it or to visit it either for religious reasons or for the economy, for the trading, or maybe for political reasons.
La Venta was occupied between about 1200 and 400 BC. In the middle of their city, the Olmec built an innovative new monument. An architectural revolution that would become an iconic part of Maya culture. At the heart of La Venta lies a mysterious vegetation-covered mound. But this is no natural hill. It's thought to be the oldest pyramid in Mexico, built almost 3,000 years ago by the Olmec. A mega monument soaring some 32 meters high and built of clay. It rests on a 120-meter wide platform and is formed from 90,000 cubic meters of material.
It's probably the biggest pyramidal structure in all ancient Mexico and Guatemala in Central America. It is the oldest pyramid of this size. The original form of it, we think, was with 4 staircases, 1 in each side.
The Maya would eventually learn to build giant stone pyramids that could withstand the elements. Archaeologists believe that the pyramid form had mythological significance.
Pyramids were conceived of as artificial hills or mountains. The later pyramids of the Maya at Chichen Itza or Copan or Palenque were specifically identified as mountains.
Mountains are important places. It's a high place. These places that are mountaintops, place that you're closer to the other world, the celestial world. And so the concept of a sacred mountain seems like it's a very long, deep tradition.
Just like at La Venta, the pyramids of the Maya cities are often composed of 2 superimposed elements. A massive base on which a pyramid temple is built. The pedestal elevates the temple, showing that the divine king is superior to his subjects. This symbolic function already existed at the time of the Olmec. La Venta was probably a sacred place of pilgrimage to which people from all over the area would have come to attend lavish ceremonies. From the top of the pyramid, priests could see for dozens of kilometers and be seen themselves by those in the plazas below.
The fact that you're standing at the top here, you have a view 360 degrees around, and that's very powerful. And you not only can you control what goes around you, but people can see you. I think only the people who were performing the ceremonies were in this area. And the elite might be in the platform at the base of the pyramid, and then the really normal people in the plaza.
Olmec social structure was itself pyramidal, based on a deeply unequal society with a powerful leader at the top.
La Venta, in terms of architecture, it represents the concentration of power. It does show planning, organization, the management of manpower, and the management of resources, of being able to gather earth from wherever they gathered earth, to bring it here and build this.
The Maya shared many traits with their Olmec neighbors. But when did the first traces of hierarchical organization appear amongst the Maya? When did an all-powerful Maya elite emerge to rule over their cities? In the Yucatan, archaeologists have spent decades looking for clues. Now, at the ancient Maya city of Kiwik, George Bay has made an astonishing discovery near the upper layers of the platform he unearthed. Beneath the temple and palace of the site are the remains of 2 buildings dating to around 600 BC, once built of wood and palm leaves. They are elevated on small individual raised platforms, facing each other at either end of a much larger platform. Their layout is identical to that of the temple and palace that was built during the Classic Age. This could be evidence of the emergence of a social hierarchy in this Maya city.
So that building would have been facing out onto this plaza and would have been the focal point. It could have been that in the pre-classic you had a temple on one end and maybe a house for emerging social stratification, a chief or tribal members who are higher status. I think what you're starting to see is increasing social complexity.
George's discovery exposes an early example of elite people controlling a Maya city. Now, new evidence unearthed nearby is exposing the lives of one of these elite early Maya people. In Paso del Macho, Evan Parker has found clues that suggest that there were elite Maya even earlier than at Kiwik. He unearthed the remains of a male teenager who was buried with a necklace and bracelet made of seashells around 800 BC.
One of the interesting things about grave goods like this is that they oftentimes reflect the status or the role of whatever individual they're buried with. Paso del Macho is an inland settlement, so these would have had to have been obtained either through an expedition to the coast or through trade routes. This would have taken a high amount of labor in order to carve these.
Alongside the jewelry, Evan found another unusual object.
We have not found anything like this in all of northern Yucatan with any burials before. This is a form of white jadeite that seems to be like an axe, but the color is unique, and what really makes it unique are these series of inscribed lines.
Evan thinks the artifact might have been worn on the head of high-status people.
So the fact that they're young and that they are buried with an incredibly rare object, which we've never seen anywhere else before, suggests that there is some degree of hereditary inequality or ascribed inequality. That's a huge moment throughout history whenever we go from people being able to simply achieve high status to being able to have it ascribed to them.
With the emergence of a hereditary social elite, the groundwork was laid for the powerful kings and lavish palaces that the Maya civilization would become known for. But hierarchy and social structure is only part of what makes a civilization. Now, archaeologists are unearthing evidence of the rise of a shared culture amongst these early Maya. 20 kilometers from where he found the elite skeleton, in the forest of the Puc region, Evan is investigating the remains of a structure.
What we're looking at right here is the corner and backside of an ancient Maya ball court. So it's one of the oldest ball courts in all of northern Yucatan.
It's where a ball game was played, one of the most iconic cultural markers of the Maya.
So most likely what would be under the ground here would be a single retaining wall for the backside of the ball court. And then there might have been a series of steps. There might be additional architecture on top of the mound, perhaps a covered area. So this would be a place of spectatorship. It would be a place for celebration, for partying. Or maybe we could imagine that there would be people here serving food or drink to those ready to enjoy the ball game.
The remains of this site date to between 600 and 500 BC. And across this area, archaeologists have unearthed another 25 ball courts from the same period. The Maya ball game might have originated in this region.
The fact that there are so many ball courts in this region suggests that it was integral. It was foundational to the social fabric of the city. And because ball courts are so prevalent here compared to other areas of the Maya world, should we begin to ask ourselves, is this where the prototypical Maya ball game really starts off? And then it spreads throughout the Maya world more broadly during the Classic period.
This game would become integral to Maya cultural identity until the present day. The ball game is still practiced in Maya communities. The goal is to return the ball to the opponent's side without using hands or feet. It's more than a simple leisure sport. It's a game of symbolism. The ball represents the movement of celestial bodies. The game embodies the balance of the cosmos, In the Puc forests, Evan thinks that the ball courts aren't just a marker of Maya civilization. Perhaps they were a driver of it.
Whenever you have such prominent architecture like a ball court in a site, this maybe suggests that it is the focal point of community identity. This is a game that is creating communal ties, so this would be almost like a social reactor.
Around 500 BC, through the development of culture and common identity, the emergence of permanent cities and the growth of powerful elite, the Maya civilization was beginning to emerge. And soon they would start to build the grand and lavish stone cities that would make the Maya world famous today. In the Puc region of Mexico, archaeologist Tomás Galarreta is excavating a site known as Chocnac. A pyramid made of stone sits at its heart. Tomás believes this was the focal point of large-scale ceremonies that attracted worshippers from across the region.
Around 450 BC, this place must have been impressive, especially for the peasants who didn't live here, all those who came from rural areas. When they came here, they probably realized that this was a really important place.
During its heyday, it was an impressive sight. The 20-meter-tall stone pyramid was at the heart of a huge ceremonial complex, with 8 smaller structures flanking it, all built on top of a platform made from 150,000 cubic meters of material that formed a wide and open plaza, a colossal monument for its time.
This is one of the greatest. It's monumental. It's about 130 meters on each side. So if you look at the volume of this building, it's really incredible that they built it at such an early time. Given the size of the main square, it was able to accommodate the whole community. I mean, it's as big as a stadium, so it was probably a gathering place for different kinds of festivities or commemorations.
To build in stone at such scale, the Maya would need to figure out how to support the weight of the giant pyramid. To solve the mystery of how the Maya managed it, Tomás and his team excavate an 8-meter-deep investigatory shaft, exposing the platform's ingenious internal structure. Under the surface of the plaza, Maya builders constructed a network of interlinking walls, forming a series of rigid stone cells. These foundations spread out the weight of the monuments they built above.
This cellular technique is known in the monumental constructions of many other important sites. It's a technique that becomes widely used during the Classic period. It shows that there was a lot of investment here. The lords of this place managed to be so powerful that they were able to sponsor and support the construction of work as large as this.
The ingenious construction of this giant monument was overseen by powerful city leaders. Evidence of the constant progression of this society towards increasing hierarchy, but also a sign of a technological shift in the Maya civilization towards the use of cut stone.
This technology is much more advanced than the type of earthen architecture that we have before the Middle Preclassic. Places like La Venta, for example, where most of the buildings are made of just packed clay or earth. And so because the Maya were able to use limestone and mortar, they could create more vertical buildings.
The change that happened from these small settlements to these late pre-classic sites was truly a remarkable time. If you think about a span of a few centuries and all of a sudden you have these large constructions.
The race for monumentality would increase over the centuries, becoming one of the markers of the classic era of Maya civilization. It was their mastery of stone that enabled Maya builders to construct a series of magnificent cities over a remarkable 1,500-year time span. In Chocnac, Tomás has discovered evidence that shows how building techniques were gradually improved and perfected over time.
Here we can see the last two stages of the construction of the pyramid. In the first one, they built this type of wall, which, although it's slightly inclined, is rather vertical. Then another ruler came and decided it was better to cover it with other types of stones like these. At the same time, the advantage was that it gave the walls greater resistance to collapsing or being pushed out.
From their reinforced foundations to their perfection of building techniques, stone became the most important building material for the Maya. By at least 450 BC, the Maya were living in large cities with powerful rulers and monumental architecture in the form of stone pyramids. They were practicing ball games that gave people living in cities far apart a common identity and culture. But one mark of a civilization remains: writing. And understanding exactly how and when the Maya developed this crucial skill has eluded investigators for decades. Today, the Maya are revered as the greatest ancient society in the Americas. And their writing and art plays a huge part in how they have captured popular imagination. It's allowed ancient ideas to span the centuries. Now, an incredible discovery is transforming long-held ideas about the development of this crucial element of Maya identity. 300 kilometers from Mexico's Yucatan state, in the Petén region, on the border of Guatemala and Belize, a site called San Bartolo has transformed archaeologists' understanding of the Maya civilization. Investigators unearthed a priceless treasure here, within a temple known as Las Pinturas. Buried several meters underground, they uncover evidence of ancient Maya paintings and writing. David Stewart is part of the team who excavated this site.
This was one of the great surprises of our excavations at San Bartolo. Not only did we find early writing in the murals of San Bartolo at 100 BC, but earlier architecture beneath that building, going back to about 300 BC, also revealed fragments of walls.
If the older walls were inscribed too, they would be the oldest examples of Maya writing ever found. Among the fragments, one piece catches David's eye.
When I was at the site, looking at a number of these fragments in our rustic jungle camp, there was one of them that had little painted hieroglyphs, and I looked at it and I was like, there is a date, an ancient date, and it was the number 7, and it was the head of a deer. 7 deer.
7 deer is writing that designates a day in the sacred Maya calendar. Radiocarbon dating shows that the inscription was made between 300 and 200 BC. The discoveries transform long-held ideas about when Maya writing emerged.
An absolutely stunning discovery that we had no preparation for, really. Our thinking before San Bartolo was the earliest Maya writing was maybe at the beginning of the Classic period.
Maya writing from the Classic period of 250 to 900 AD is well understood. They used symbols to represent whole words or syllables. The evidence at San Bartolo exposes the origin of the system.
It's clearly the same writing system we have from later Maya civilization. The discovery tells us that I think the Maya were developing their own writing. They didn't borrow it from somewhere else.
Archaeologist Heather Hurst was involved in the excavation of the site alongside David Stewart. At the University of Texas at Austin, archaeologists have reconstructed a section of the images found at San Bartolo. It's almost 12 meters long.
Every time we look at this thing, we see new things.
There's some refits.
It took 10 years to conserve and reassemble the images.
There are 3,400 pieces in this puzzle. Every detail is painted. So the lines of the bird, the arc, the figure's body, even the strands of the hair. This tells us that the painters were expert painters, truly master artists. The incredible thing is 1,000 years later, they're using the same techniques.
The paintings and writing from San Bartolo help historians understand Maya beliefs that were developing at the time.
Well, what we're seeing on the walls that are preserved is an overwhelming array of images of Maya deities and scenes of Maya mythology.
To see what the Maya were believing and seeing in their own world in color, it's truly unique.
The early Maya prepared these walls using a material known as stucco. It's a plaster that the Maya used to cover walls before painting with colored pigments. The same technique would allow the Maya to adorn the walls of their cities with incredible decorations a few centuries later. The discoveries at San Bartolo help put a date to the emergence of the Maya as a true civilization.
One of the things that I think it tells us, this early writing, is that there is a remarkable degree of cultural unity among the pre-classic Maya of that time. Say starting around 500, 400 BC. That's probably when this crystallizes, when we see a unification in this expression of culture and civilization.
The development of writing and art allowed the Maya to become one of the most advanced and enduring civilizations of Central America. Piece by piece, the mystery of how the Maya civilization began is finally being assembled by archaeologists.
So how do we envision the transition from a simple egalitarian society and a more complex stratified society? It's not just a single jump.
And the material culture shows us that these small cities had far-flung connections, and they were trading with others, and both regionally and from very far away.
There are lots of changes that take place in that period. What we have by the end of that are all of the major elements that then become classic Maya civilization. So monumental architecture, the writing system is there, the calendar is already there. So the pre-classic is really what set the stage for everything that came after.
Archaeological excavations and discoveries across Mexico and Central America are offering new clues about how the great Maya civilization developed, exposing the process by which the Maya began to settle and learn to make the immense stone monuments they would become famous for, and how their culture and shared identity evolved through ball games, art, and writing. The foundations of a society that would endure until the present day. In the forests of southern Mexico and Central America arose a powerful and complex civilization, the Maya. From their early beginnings as semi-nomadic groups, they would develop sophisticated writing, astronomy, and engineering.
All of these things are hallmarks of a great society.
Their construction of vast stone cities and towering pyramids heralded the arrival of a golden age.
Somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 people lived here. So this was a great metropolis.
But within 700 years, this civilization collapsed, and many of its cities were abandoned.
The forests grew back and eventually just took over.
Now, teams of archaeologists want to solve the mystery of this collapse.
That's fantastic. The design is very unique for this period of time.
They're unearthing remarkable new evidence of poisoned water.
One drop on your tongue would kill you.
And vicious jungle battles.
These pictures can help us to understand warfare.
Hidden temples.
1,600 years ago, a Maya person will be here, standing in front of a building.
And divine rulers who began to lose their grip on power.
And I was like, what did we just find?
In the process, they unravel the true story of the Maya at this crucial point in their history and expose the sequence of events that forced them to desert their cities. In the rainforest of northern Guatemala lies one of the world's greatest lost cities, Tikal. Built by the ancient Maya civilization some 2,000 years ago, archaeologist Edwin Roman Ramirez has been exploring this region for the past 20 years. Today, the tropical rainforest obscures all but the tallest pyramids.
When you look over here, you have to imagine the over here was covered by houses, like at least 23 kilometers that way was not a single tree. Maybe some areas that were farming, some gardens. It was a very large city. Tikal was almost like 160 square kilometers. It's huge, it's massive. Everywhere that you see here will be a building, will be a house.
Investigations and aerial scanning at Tikal have allowed archaeologists to understand what the city once looked like. When Tikal was in its prime, it was immense. The Maya built a dense ceremonial center, with at least 5 pyramids towering up to 70 meters tall. Tikal was once home to an estimated 90,000 people.
They were some of the largest buildings in the Maya world for sure at that time. And you can see how they start to get very more creative. And this is the hallmark of Tikal.
Today, more than 6,000 ancient structures have been identified in Tikal. Grand monuments built during the so-called classic era of the Maya civilization. The era was the golden age of the Maya. It lasted from around 250 to 900 AD. It was when many great cities were built.
When we refer to the Maya, we're talking about huge settlements that we can call capitals, but of course all the area was highly populated. I mean, the achievements they have, the development, their technology, it's overwhelming.
During the 8th century, the estimates range from 7 to 11 million people. I mean, you compare that to any part of the world in that period, this is incredible.
The classic era was marked by the presence of powerful kings, ruling from their pyramid-filled cities.
They achieved something that the Egyptians never did, really steep pyramids.
The king positioned himself at the top of those pyramids and officiating the most important rituals as if the personified deity itself. So those buildings legitimized the supernatural source of power of Maya kings and queens.
In places like Tikal, the rulers lived with other elite people near the city's ceremonial heart. But valuable clues about Tikal's history and fate could lie in the homes of common people. In the east of the city, Edwin's colleague, Cristina Garcia Leal, is excavating the house of a non-elite family. It was a Maya tradition to bury their dead beneath the floors of buildings, and the team recently discovered a body here.
Look how's it going over here?
It's good. We removed the body and now we have the 3 glass vessels to clean.
It looks so good. They are not broken. They don't have any scratches.
Nope, not broken. And this one has, it's polychromed, both of these.
Oh, both of them?
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
So this is, it's a cup, and it was used for drinking hot chocolate. And it's a very normal thing to drink back then. A very common drink. So you can see there was a line coming here, red on top, a black line coming underneath, and you can see that there were figures drawn in it and a red border in the bottom. So these three vessels are part of the offering associated to the burial that we found here. So you can see the body was laid this way. There was also another plate that was turned upside down and placed behind the head of the individual as a sort of pillow or a resting place for the head.
The design is very unique for this period of time, and that will help us to date this burial.
Edwin can use these ceramics and others unearthed across Tikal to reconstruct a timeline of the city and find out how Tikal fits into the history of the Maya Classic era. At his field laboratory, Edwin's team study pottery artifacts they've unearthed in dwellings of common people at Tikal. The techniques that the Maya used to manufacture and decorate ceramics changed over time. The team can link these telltale changes to specific time periods.
In this small table, we are seeing more than 1,000 years of occupation of Tikal. We can see through ceramics that this is the beginning of Tikal. They are monochromatic. Normally they are red, black, and this is when Tikal was a really small city.
This pottery is from 350 BC, after the Maya had settled here and established the city.
And now we can see a change. This is the beginning of the classic period. We start to have more colors, and what we are seeing over here is a change of technology. This is around the year 250, and this is when Tikal starts to become the more important city in the Maya region. Later on, we start to have another type. This is the classic period from around 600 to 800 AD. This is when Tikal was in his peak. Here we are seeing the last 200 years of occupation of Tikal. And you can see again, the shape is different. And that's how ceramics help us to see and reconstruct this society from the beginning to the end.
The evidence shows that Tikal's power spanned the full duration of the Maya Classic era. And it reveals that at the end of that era, around 900 AD, Tikal was mysteriously deserted. The Maya left this immense city and abandoned its pyramids to the jungle, never to return and build large-scale monuments here again. Investigations across the Maya region have shown that Tikal wasn't alone. Many cities, particularly in the Maya lowlands, were deserted. The building of grand monuments suddenly ceased.
Whatever system existed in 500 and 600 and 700, it broke down between 8 and 900 AD, such that most classic Maya kingdoms were simply abandoned to the forest. People could not live there anymore.
Public buildings were abandoned because to really have public buildings in good shape, you need to have a good government and you have to have some kind of social stability.
The mystery of what caused the collapse of urban Maya society in this area has puzzled archaeologists for decades. One long-standing theory is that cities ran out of water for their growing populations.
You're not supposed to have giant cities in a tropical forest. It's thin soils, few rivers, and a long dry season. The real secret of the Mayas is their ability to preserve water during a dry season, which to the north at places like Tikal is 6 months.
In Tikal today, Edwin has mapped and investigated more than 70 square kilometers around the city. So he understands the challenge the Maya faced.
The closest rivers are like 30 kilometers far away from Tikal, and the lake at least 40 kilometers away. The Mayas need to get creative and start to think how we can survive in this very difficult environment. Our colleagues have been excavating in this area, and we know that was modified by the Maya. There used to be a natural spring that runs behind the palace. And what they did is they start to build dams.
The Maya built an ingenious system of reservoirs to collect and store water at Tikal. Some reservoirs were even fitted with a filtration system. Builders imported sand and a special rock called zeolite from over 25 kilometers away, allowing water to run through it and be cleaned. Reservoirs concentrated the population and the power of rulers who controlled the city. Now, a team think that investigating the reservoirs forensically might expose clues about why cities were abandoned. David Lentz is an archaeobotanist who specializes in the study of ancient living environments. His team has already taken samples from reservoirs in Tikal and is now working at an ancient Maya city 90 kilometers away called Calakmul.
This is an interesting site because it's right next to the palace area here. So if you can imagine, there were 24 million liters of water in this reservoir. So it was an enormous structure. If I was back in Maya times, I would be underwater right now.
Today, he's taking samples of genetic material known as environmental or eDNA. He'll use the samples to identify the organisms present in the water.
We're going to look at the vegetation that surrounded their reservoirs and what kind of plants they grew for food. There are many mysteries, and hopefully we'll provide some answers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to shave down the wall, try to keep it clean, because you can see this is kind of older stuff here. It's been exposed for a few days, so we want everything to be nice and fresh for us. We're going to take one eDNA sample from each 20 centimeters.
David will take these samples to his laboratory. The results from this reservoir and from Tikal will expose new evidence about the desertion of Maya cities. In the United States, at the University of Cincinnati, David Lentz will analyze samples he took from ancient Maya reservoirs. Today, he's looking for evidence of environmental DNA in samples from Tikal.
This came from the Temple Reservoir. In addition to looking for DNA, we have looked for different kinds of contaminants from the reservoirs. Hi, here's the samples that we want to use for DNA extraction.
Excellent. Let's see what plants were around.
All right.
The team pulverized soil samples to release any DNA attached to the particles. They separate the DNA from any remaining soil particles by spinning the samples rapidly. They'll use chemicals to remove organic compounds until they're only left with DNA.
Well, this is the exciting moment. We get to see if all of that work has resulted in DNA in our samples, and I have high hopes. Wow. Now we have the beautiful DNA from Tikal in front of us.
Environmental DNA has revolutionized research. New analysis techniques can identify plants and species from the genetic material they leave in the environment.
The remarkable thing is that in these 2 microliters of DNA that we measured, there can be DNA from hundreds and hundreds of plant species.
When David studies sequences of DNA from the reservoirs at Tikal, the results are groundbreaking.
This shows that there were serious infestations of cyanobacteria in at least 2 of the reservoirs. And these are a group of blue-green algae that produce incredibly toxic microcystins and extremely dangerous because 1 drop on your tongue would kill you.
The reservoir at Tikal Center had no effective filter system, and uncontrolled bacteria growth might have been caused by food waste, poisoning the water.
This was a big problem, especially the palace reservoir. Having the water turn green right in front of the palace of the ruler, then the people must have seen this as a failing of their leadership.
And that's not all. David's team also detect mercury in the water samples. at a level 17 times higher than is safe for humans. At Tikal, the source of mercury has been linked to paint production, especially a red pigment that the Maya used on a wide scale.
And one thing the Maya would use as a pigment was cinnabar, which is mercury sulfate. And so there would be a constant buildup in mercury in the sediments and in the waters of the reservoir. And so the rulers were consuming mercury every day in their food. And this would have created a real problem for them. One of the effects of the mercury, there's a condition they call metabolic syndrome. And one of the symptoms of that is people become enormously obese.
This ancient carving shows one of the last rulers of Tikal, a man known as Dark Sun, who is clearly shown as obese.
And also it affects their neurology in their brain and elsewhere. It would have perhaps affected their mental acuity and their ability to make good decisions.
These astonishing new discoveries suggest that contaminated water put the authority of Tikal's rulers under pressure, possibly contributing to the city's collapse. And now, evidence is showing that pressure on the rulers was magnified by conflict. In Guatemala, near the center of Tikal, Edwin is investigating the giant pyramids.
In Tikal, we have at least 5 big temples. This is one of them. This is the first one, and date around 600 AD. It's almost 50 meters tall.
The rulers of Tikal ordered pyramids built as symbols of power, but also of war.
They tried to show how powerful you are. They were used to commemorate the victories of Tikal against other cities, and also make the people of this city feel proud about it, because the war was not won only by kings, also was won by all the army and all the people from this city.
Could war have led to the collapse of this great city? And who was Tikal fighting against? Clues lie 90 kilometers north of Tikal, in the ancient Maya city of Calakmul, across the border into Mexico. It was ruled by the Canul dynasty, known also as the Snake Kingdom. This city covers some 70 square kilometers. David Lentz is investigating the tallest pyramid at Calakmul.
Right. Try to imagine what this would have been like when the Maya were here. That all of the forest here, much of it would have been cleared. There were agricultural fields, there were houses that extend close to the horizon. My personal estimates would be somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 people lived here, and over 6,000 structures. So this was a great metropolis.
Calakmul was settled as far back as 800 BC. But most of the larger buildings were constructed later, during the Maya Classic era. This was a city to rival Tikal in power and beauty.
There's an enormous amount of energy and also a lot of planning that went into this. The internal rooms had to be supported by large beams from trees that were specially picked out of the rainforest. This was an enormous undertaking.
The Canul dynasty who ruled Calakmul had ambitions to seize power from their southern neighbors in Tikal. And soon large-scale clashes broke out between the two regional powers. Now archaeologists are beginning to understand Maya warfare in more detail. In Mexico City, at the National Museum of Anthropology, historian Gabriela Rivera Acosta is investigating remarkable images from the ancient Maya site of Bonampak.
These pictures can help us to understand warfare. For example, who was involved in warfare. The nobility have the most complex weaponry system. The common people use something more simple, like just a long spear and a circular shield. But we must understand in the context of how the warfare is so important for the Maya in the classic times.
The Maya depicted how prisoners were captured and body parts kept as human trophies.
They can take the head of his enemy and take to their own city.
These images give archaeologists an idea of how Maya conflict played out.
Sometimes we can find tiny battles, but in some other we can find huge wars to involve a lot of allies.
If a city like Calakmul was to defeat the powerful Tikal in battles like this, they would need to find allies to support them. And clues to where they've found support might be hiding in a mysterious lost city. In the 1960s, stone carvings began showing up in museums across the world. Artifacts taken by looters from an unknown Maya city that was nicknamed Site Q. Eventually, a location was identified. Today, archaeologists are heading to the lost Maya city. Site Q is now known as La Corona. It's a remote location and difficult to access. Tomás Barrientos and Marcelo Canuto lead the team here. Marcelo found ultimate proof that this city is indeed Site Q.
What I found in 2005 was a panel that was identical in style to the panels that had been looted. And it not only was identical in style, but it talked about the same historical figures that were mentioned in these other panels. So we had panels from all over the world that mentioned King so-and-so, right? And maybe a little bit of text that tells us he was born here or something along those lines. The panels that I found here talked about that exact same king. And so it became clear that La Corona and Site Q were one and the same.
The looted stone panels gave tantalizing clues about the city's link with the much larger city of Calakmul and its Kanul dynasty rulers.
Site Q talked about this site's relationship with the Kanul kingdom located at Calakmul. So everybody knew that Site Q was related in a very close and intimate way with the dynasty at Calakmul. So finding the actual place that was associated with Site Q allowed us to say, okay, now we can ask why here? Why would Kanul be interested in this spot?
The team needed to find more evidence of the link between Calakmul and La Corona.
Well, here we are in the main square of La Corona.
What's fascinating is the fact that what you see is this kind of flat area with a lot of trees, but you have to imagine it completely free of trees.
The ceremonial center of La Corona was formed from dozens of buildings, arranged around a wide central plaza where ceremonies and gatherings would have taken place. On the east side stood two 15-meter-tall temples, facing a palace where the royal families lived. It was built in a fertile area with an abundance of water.
So these would have been brilliant, bright, colorful places, teeming with people coming to maybe seek an audience with the king, or come to buy and sell some objects or some tools.
It was a very lively place with lots of people. However, La Corona did not have a population as big as some cities that had 20, 30 or 80,000 inhabitants like Tikal. Here there was more like 5,000 to 8,000 inhabitants. It was a small city.
It was in this ceremonial center that the team would soon find evidence of the link between La Corona and the Kanul leaders of Calakmul.
This is where the structure appeared 5 years ago.
When we got here years ago, we saw this earthen mound, and then there was a tree also growing here that with its roots looked like it was part of the mass of earth and so forth. Then we got LiDAR.
When the team examined LiDAR scans of the area, The high-resolution map of the ground's contours showed something unusual.
When we looked at the LiDAR, every little white dot represents a separate building. At La Corona, we knew that these were all separate buildings. We could see them. But what we didn't realize was that this was a building. This white dot here. We realized, that looks man-made. Let's investigate it.
LiDAR revealed that the mound concealed a hidden structure.
We're right in front of a building, so it has this sort of a smooth, what looks like a slope. But what you have to imagine here is essentially where that root is that's coming out of the ground, that would have been the level of the ceiling, sort of the roof.
The team unearthed a small temple. There were no doors, but it had columns on either side of the entrance. And inside, on the central axis facing upwards, an intricately carved altar.
And I was like, what did we just find?
The altar, displayed in its own temple at La Corona, must have been conveying important information to the Maya who lived here.
It was a beautiful altar, perfectly preserved, that talked about a period of time that we knew was really important, and that really gave us something quite fascinating.
It took the team almost 2 years to safely retrieve the huge limestone block so that they could study it further. It's almost 1.5 meters long and 1.2 meters wide, and it weighs nearly a ton. Today, it's safely stored in the Museum of Guatemala City.
Every time I see it, it's like feeling the same emotion as when we first saw it in La Corona.
The hieroglyphs on this altar give Tomás important information about La Corona's link with the Canul dynasty of Calakmul, a family known as the Snake Kings.
Here we see the portrait of King Chak Toki Chak of La Corona. The king holds a scepter with a two-headed snake. But the most important thing is the relationship between La Corona and the Snake dynasty. Here we see on the altar the king of La Corona invoking 2 of the 3 gods, who are the patrons of La Corona. But we think that these gods were imposed by the Canuls.
The altar reveals that the Canul dynasty of Calakmul imposed their power and influence over La Corona, gaining an important ally in their quest to overcome their rivals at Tikal.
This is something that we've seen in other cities. But here in La Corona, I think this is the important point of what was an alliance of over 2 centuries. It's rare to see 2 Maya cities establishing an alliance that lasted for that long.
Now we can ask, why here? Why would Canul be interested in this spot on the map? And one of the things that really became clear to us is that when you look at the location of the site of La Corona relative to Calakmul and its enemy Tikal, this place is strategic.
As time went by, the Canul dynasty spread its power and advanced towards Tikal. By the 6th century, confrontation was widespread. These 2 superpowers dragged allied cities into their power struggle. The Canuls of Calakmul eventually won the upper hand, as explained by carvings at the Tikal-controlled city of Dos Pilas.
This is the record of one particular ruler. His name was Balak Chunk Awil. His brother or half-brother was the king at Tikal, and they were in conflict with one another. And what this inscription tells us is this: the Lord flips him, turns him over to become an ally of the Canuls against his own family, essentially, at Tikal.
There's been a common use of the metaphor of the Game of Thrones example. Sometimes alliances collapsed, and people who were married in a previous generation that were friends were now enemies. I like to think it may be a game, but it was a deadly game.
Balak and Awil was really instrumental in helping expand the Canuls all throughout that area of the Maya lowlands in this rivalry against Tikal.
In 679 AD, the Canuls of Calakmul finally conquered Tikal. But their victory didn't last long.
Tikal turned the tables on the Snake Kingdom and defeated their ruler. And then after that, Calakmul went into decline, and Tikal became the preeminent city of the lowland Maya area.
Clashes would continue well into the 800s, and constant conflict took its toll.
There's no real winner in this war, as it turns out, that played itself out over the Classic period for centuries. And the most records of war that we have in the inscriptions comes right before the collapse. I think that is an indication of what was happening and of how everything fell apart. Clearly, warfare was important and maybe even the driving factor in that.
With war weakening Tikal, Calakmul, and their allied cities, the rulers' control hung in the balance. At Tikal, leaders needed to demonstrate their power to maintain control of their people. They demanded ever larger pyramids be built, towering symbols of authority. Now, investigations are exposing how they were able to keep building ever bigger structures. Not far from the city's ceremonial center, Edwin Roman Ramirez's team are tunneling into the north face of a 13-meter-tall temple.
We're seeing how Mayas built these big structures. We go and we make these tunnels to go and be able to understand the beginning of this building.
Clues in the construction show that the Maya were building on top of older structures, expanding them over time.
They have one structure and they start to build one on the top and another on the top. Now here we are seeing, this is the construction field that they used to cover this building right here. And that's how we know the history of this building.
What started out as small pyramids were expanded over time by successive rulers, each eager to show off their power and commemorate events. Sometimes kings were even buried inside the stacked pyramids. As Edwin's team tunnel even further into the monument, they discover astonishing proof of this stacked building concept.
1,600 years ago, a Maya person will be here standing in front of a building. You have to remove all of this. This is a construction that was built later, and that's how we can see these are different stages. This specific building has at least 7 different layers of constructions that start around the year 250, and the last version is around 500 AD.
Even with this layering technique, the huge pyramids and temples in Tikal took a great deal of effort and resources to build. Tensions mounted in the face of constant conflict and poisoned water supplies.
So they built bigger temples and more rituals, and that, of course, solved nothing. In fact, it made it worse. This enormous waste of energy, a symbol of growing inequality, all these problems were building up, and the people were hungry and so on. It just made the people more irritated.
Escalating problems posed a challenge to the power of rulers who were supposed to be divine.
The rulers in the classic period were the link between the deities and the mortals. And if they are failing on that, what's happening? I mean, I'm going to be unsatisfied. I'm going to be angry. So then I'm going to be like, I don't trust them. I don't respect them anymore. I don't see why I should be keeping them and giving them all I'm supposed to do if they are not fulfilling their job. And that really creates a lot of instabilities.
Now, new research suggests that the divine nature of the rulers might have been put to the ultimate test. In the forests near Calakmul, David Lentz is exploring the areas where the Maya once lived.
You can see here that this is a large house group with a platform made of stone. And there was probably some kind of wooden structure on top of this.
He's looking for evidence of how the Maya sought to control their natural environment.
Ah, está bien. ¿No hay frutas y flores en este árbol? Okay. The purpose of doing these modern vegetation studies is to give us a benchmark so we can compare the modern forest and evaluate what the ancient forest was like.
Studies like this allow archaeologists to understand how the Maya managed the forests around their cities, utilizing trees like the Manilcara sapota.
Oh, this is an interesting tree. This was a very important tree to the ancient Maya. It was used for the lintels for the big temples. And they use this kind of wood because it's very durable and very tough, and it can withstand the weight of many stones up on top of it.
The demand on the forests was high because wood was used in many ways. At Tikal, firewood was vital for the production of a special building material. Today, the buildings of Tikal appear to be formed of exposed stone, but they once looked very different. Underground, the Maya habit of building over the top of existing buildings lets Edwin see what the exterior originally looked like.
Over here, you can see how they build it. You have limestone blocks, and they cover all of this with the stucco. Stucco is to decorate the building, also is helping to insulate the core of the building from water, from the sun. They were not thinking those buildings for a short period of time. They were thinking that they were gonna last.
When Tikal was at its height, its buildings looked very different to today. The Maya covered almost every surface of their monuments and floors in stucco, which they painted in bright colors. Maya builders made stucco by burning and then crushing limestone into a powder.
They knew how to produce it in a massive way to be able to completely cover the entire city. And we are talking about kilometers of square kilometers of stucco.
It's estimated that for every square meter, the Maya needed to burn 20 trees to produce the stucco needed. The consequences would be immense. David Lentz thinks that deforestation might have contributed to the abandonment of Maya cities.
There's evidence coming out of Brazil that shows that when a certain percentage of the forest is cleared, and that's like 30% of the forest, that changes the pattern of rainfall. When you have a rainforest, the roots of the trees suck that water up and bring it back up to the surface through transpiration, and this adds to the water cycle. We have studied Tikal for a decade now, and we know from the pollen evidence that they had cleared about 60% to 70% of the forest. They kept the other 40% and protected it and conserved it, but still they had cleared about 2/3 of the land. So it was too much.
Experts have found that a series of multi-decade droughts in the 9th century caused famine. Drought could have been the final nail in the coffin for the rulers who sought to convince their people of their divine status. The abandonment of Tikal and other large cities at the end of the Classic era, around 900 AD, would have a domino effect on smaller cities like La Corona.
We see how the smaller cities couldn't maintain their population on their own because they relied on interdependence with other cities.
The system was kind of fragmented and breaking up politically, economically, and so people started to basically leave these centers. And by the mid-9th century or so, this place was a shell of itself. And certainly by the 900s, it was abandoned. Then, of course, the forests grew back and eventually just took over the site, and that's what we have today.
Then the classical cities remained abandoned for many centuries. And although they evoked a certain memory, They started to get lost in people's memories. So much so that the rediscovery of these cities happened almost 1,000 years later.
Today, at cities like Tikal, hundreds of abandoned buildings are waiting to be reclaimed from the forest and restored to their former glory. Each one a testament to the architectural ingenuity of the Maya, and a reminder that once these ceremonial centers were deserted, many weren't returned to by the Maya. But the abandonment of these cities might not have been as sudden as archaeologists once thought. Outside the ceremonial center of Tikal, Edwin's team are uncovering settlements that were still used after monumental building ceased.
In the central area where the monumental architecture was placed, most of the royal family had to move. But when you talk about the process of abandonment of a city, it's not something that happened fast. In this case, we know it's 200 years. People start to migrate, looking for better places to live. And what we know is that people didn't disappear. It's not the end of Maya culture. It's a transition.
The centers of power were abandoned. The main buildings were abandoned. The structures that serve for public services or for public performances, but that doesn't mean that people fled away like it was thought before. Big cities eventually got abandoned because their structure or their layout was not what was needed.
Some Maya moved south, to the highlands where population centers endured, while others chose to migrate north towards emerging powers like Chichen Itza. Today, new discoveries and excavations are giving archaeologists a much clearer understanding of the so-called collapse of the Maya Classic era.
Most of us, we don't use that word anymore because collapse means a rupture. It's a complete fracture, like saying before and after, like if there was not a link. The thing is that it took a long time to understand what happened.
Now, archaeologists are uncovering the combination of events that led divine rulers of grand cities like Tikal and Calakmul to gradually lose their power and influence. How wars weakened big cities and their allies. The impact of poisoned water supplies and drought on large populations, and on the authority of their leaders. That resources squandered on giant pyramids and lavishly colored cities might have led to environmental collapse. But also how the desertion of ceremonial centers and a fall in the power of divine rulers didn't mean the loss of the Maya civilization itself. The ancient Maya, a seemingly lost civilization that abandoned their cities in the forests of Mexico and Central America. But what is the truth behind this remarkable society?
They were able to survive, to adapt, and even to evolve in their own way.
Now, teams of investigators are setting out to uncover the dark secrets of the Maya.
A massive concentration of dead body down there.
Using new technology to expose the fate of the last capital cities.
Here's the staircase leading up to the top.
Venturing deep into mystical underground caverns.
This is amazing. There's pottery everywhere.
And finding new evidence of disaster.
There are these war victims or these sacrificial victims.
They're asking what happened when foreign invaders landed on Maya shores.
We have evidence of violence, burned buildings that were never rebuilt.
How the Maya coped with climate catastrophe.
These crystals are like time capsules.
And how, despite a perfect storm of threats, they endured. When early archaeologists discovered lost cities deep in the forests of Mexico and Central America, the legend of the ancient Maya was born. The deserted pyramids inspired ideas of a vanished civilization that had long since disappeared. Archaeologists split Maya history into eras, The Classic era lasted some 650 years and ended in the so-called collapse around 900 AD. This was some 600 years before the arrival of Spanish conquistadors on Maya shores. But contrary to popular belief, the collapse wasn't the end of the Maya.
They have all these fractures in their culture. Sometimes they left the cities behind, but they were always innovative and creating new ways of surviving.
They didn't disappear. The Maya suffers too much, but they kept going. And today, the Mayan society still exists.
So how did Maya resilience allow them to prevail against the Classic era collapse and the devastation caused by Spanish conquerors? During the Classic period, the Maya region spread from southern Mexico through Guatemala, Belize, and beyond. The collapse saw the abandonment of cities concentrated around the southern lowlands. Now, in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, archaeologists are investigating the ancient Maya city of Chichen Itza to look for clues about what happened next. The Maya were still using this site and building here after the Classic era collapse. It's home to an iconic pyramid, the Temple of Kukulkan. And to the northwest, the largest Maya ball court ever found. Dominic Rizzolo and Sam Meacham are part of a team investigating the site using new technology. They're using drones and scanning equipment to map out the city. Today, Sam is conducting the aerial surveys.
It just goes out and autonomously flies this route over the entire site of Chichen Itza, and within a matter of hours, we have a high-resolution map. It's all autonomous, and so it's just going to take up, and you'll see once it gets to 25 meters, it's going to start the mission.
Drones offer archaeologists a unique perspective over the site.
And now it's going to fly over to the start point, and now it's going to start capturing photos here.
The drone takes thousands of photos that can be used to create a 3D model. But the team is also doing high-resolution scanning of the site's contours.
So this sends out lasers from this LiDAR sensor, and it has an onboard system that registers all of those points collected by the laser to help us create a 3D map of the site as we walk.
The LiDAR system creates a 3D point cloud that accurately maps every physical object in the area.
And it'd be nice to capture the geometry of the ball court. And again, we can integrate all of these data into our aerial survey of the site. So we can see the plaza floor, it's capturing the trees as well. And then here's the staircase leading up to the top of side of the ball court.
Technology like drones and LiDAR are revolutionizing archaeology.
We're collaborating with the National Institute of Anthropology and History to produce essentially a comprehensive digital atlas of Chichen Itza. So we want to capture all of Chichen Itza, every building, every carved stone monument, every stone essentially, for the entire site.
The models that the team are producing show the full extent of the city and expose the truth about what happened after the Maya collapse.
There's this popular conception of the disappearance of the Maya after the collapse of Classic period Maya civilization in the southern lowlands. But what you see here is a fluorescence of Maya culture, a rise of the architecture that we see here. This was all after the so-called collapse of Classic period Maya.
The scanning work helps expose how the classic collapse of the Maya did not trigger a dark age. In fact, the Maya continued advancing their engineering skills. Octavio Juarez has carried out archaeological work here for the last 8 years. The Kukulkan pyramid is a focus of research.
This building was rebuilt approximately around the year 900 AD. The building is 31 meters high, 55 meters at the base.
The pyramid is a masterpiece of ancient engineering.
The pyramid is made up of 9 staggered layers. It has 4 stairways, each aligned towards a cardinal point. Each of these stairways has 91 steps. If we add them up, that's 364. At the top, we have another step. Added together, that gives us 365 steps, which refers to the calendar.
This building is proof of the Maya people's sophisticated understanding of the calendar and astronomy. Twice a year, during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun traces out the shape of a moving snake in shadow, linking with the carved head of a feathered serpent, the Maya god Kukulkan.
It marks a large part of the agricultural cycle for us. At the spring equinox, when this phenomenon occurs, traditionally people began to work the land to carry out agricultural work. And later, on the autumn equinox, the first crops began to be harvested.
While the Classic Era collapse around 900 AD didn't see the Maya abandon Chichen Itza, the continued expansion of the city had a limit. Eventually, catastrophe would strike. Octavio is looking for clues about what happened.
By 1300 AD, the city was practically abandoned. The entire city was covered by vegetation, and it remained covered under vegetation until 1840, when the first explorers came.
Restoration teams at the site are conserving and cleaning the city's ruins, finding new clues as they work.
It allows us to find some elements that are covered under microorganisms, such as the pigments that form part of the building's decoration. Another important aspect is that it allows us to see in more detail some decorative elements, such as this mask of the god of rain.
The Maya god of rain is called Chac, and carvings depicting this god are common across Chichen Itza.
On this side, we have his eyes. And on this side, it's characterized by having his open mouth, in which part of his teeth can be seen.
There's a good reason the Maya made so many Chac carvings at Chichen Itza.
In the Yucatan Peninsula, we don't have surface water, such as lakes or rivers. 100% of agriculture was based on the rainy season. So there was a very important cult focused on this deity in relation to rain.
Could drought have caused the Maya to abandon this city? 100 kilometers away, paleoclimatologist Martin Medina is preparing to enter the Tzabna cave system.
It's been 15 years last time I was here, and I'm thrilled. It's exciting.
There are clues hidden in this cave that let Martin peer deep into the past and learn about the climate during the time of the ancient Maya.
This is the cave Tzabna. There's hundreds of caves like this one in the region.
Martin is hunting for formations known as stalagmites, formed over centuries from dripping water that contains calcium carbonate.
So this big formation is a stalagmite, and it's being fed by the stalactite, which is above. If I were to cut this stalagmite, if I were to do a cross-section, you would see a very distinctive growth pattern that looks like a tree ring. So you would see layers and layers and layers of calcite accumulation over probably 2,000, 3,000 years. For me, it's like a book, and it has information that is very, very important.
Information that exposes a climatic change that would have a cataclysmic consequence for the Maya civilization. This stalagmite traps vital information about past climate, and rainfall in particular. Martin can see how the stalagmite is formed using a high-resolution microscope.
I can see the crystals, and these are the crystals that have the information that I'm interested in finding and deciphering. I see hundreds and hundreds of crystals. They have a combination of the elements that came from the cave and rainfall. These crystals are like time capsules that can tell us whether it was wetter or drier in the past.
Rain leaves distinctive chemical signatures within the crystals in the form of different isotopes of oxygen, depending on whether it's heavy or light rain. It allows Martin to build up a chart of ancient rainfall patterns.
What I have here is a record of rainfall, and what we're seeing here are periods of wetness in the region and dryness. A series of wet, dry, dry. The periods where we see severe drought, the droughts were actually quite significant compared to today. Precipitation dropped by half of how much it rains today during several of these droughts.
Evidence collected by Martin and other teams suggests that drought played a key role in the desertion of Maya cities, including Chichen Itza.
So what is remarkable about stalagmites is that we can go from information in these crystals to get a very high resolution record.
New research techniques like this are transforming our understanding of the past and helping to explain why the grand pyramids and monuments of Chichen Itza were abandoned.
Between 1000 and 1100 AD, and there was one of the greatest droughts in Maya history that lasted 80 years. And we think that the catastrophic die-off from famine was one of the greatest in world history.
Chichen Itza started losing its power or its grip as being the main site in that area around 1100s.
And yet, people survived. And the countryside and political leaders, also survived to the point that within decades, you have a new capital.
The Maya headed west and built a new capital city at a site called Mayapan. The city would become the last great capital in this part of the Maya region. Archaeologist Carlos Peraza Lope is in charge of the city's excavation.
Mayapan
is a very large city. According to our research, it's estimated that between 15,000 and 17,000 people lived here. We have recorded more than 4,000 archaeological structures, and what we see today is only 5 to 10% of this huge city.
Mayapan became a powerful city-state. At its heart, a large pyramid similar to that of Chichen Itza, and nearby, a circular building possibly used as an observatory. It was the most densely populated city in the Maya lowlands. Just like at Chichen Itza, the Maya dedicated their pyramid to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. And the pyramid was carefully orientated too.
Chichen Itza exhibits a staircase shadow on the equinoxes, so Mayapan is complementary in exhibiting it on the solstices.
Maya cosmos is divided up into these north, south, east, west with sort of a central point, and that temple, the Temple of Kukulkan, becomes the center, the literal and metaphorical center of both the city and the Maya cosmos for the post-classic.
Unlike earlier cities, it's not buried by centuries of soil. And when you walk archaeologically through the city, it's like going to Pompeii without the ash.
Now archaeologists think they know why the Maya chose this location for their new city. Still traumatized by droughts, the Maya rulers might have chosen to build their city at a site generously supplied by water, in the form of underground water-filled caverns, known as cenotes.
We are at the edge of the Chenmul cenote. They can be found next to the pyramid of Kukulkan. We have recorded 46 cenotes inside the city. And outside the walls, there are more than 100.
Cenotes were perfect sources of drinking water in a crisis, but they were difficult to access, so less useful for agriculture. But why are so many cenotes found in this area? At Sabnar Cave, Martin Medina is investigating how cenotes are formed.
This is amazing. I hadn't seen this part before. So many shells. There's hundreds of thousands of them. It's a coral reef. We're seeing an ancient reef that is probably older than 5 million years.
The fossil shells are clues to what sort of rock this is.
So this is all limestone. So when this rock gets in contact with water, it starts dissolving, and the cavities, they're formed from rainfall over millions of years, dissolving the rock and forming these amazing, intricate caves.
The limestone rock and the relative ease with which it dissolves when rainwater flows through cracks explains how caves and cenotes form. But there's another remarkable reason why this area of the Yucatan has so many cenotes.
We are exactly on the rim of the Chicxulub crater, which is the crater that was formed from the impact of the asteroid associated with the extinction of the dinosaurs.
The rim of a vast 66-million-year-old asteroid crater is where a dense concentration of cenotes are found. Perhaps because rock deep beneath the limestone is more fractured, allowing water to flow through. This quirk of geology would become an important part of Maya culture.
You can imagine in a region like this where there's severe droughts, it doesn't rain much to begin with, how important places like this, a cenote, was for the local inhabitants.
Cenotes provided the Maya with drinking water. But Martin is looking for evidence that cenotes also had important mystical connections for the Maya. Cave systems across the Yucatan Peninsula became important places of ritual for the Maya, a vital element of their religious belief.
There's pottery everywhere. These pieces of pottery are probably classic or pre-classic ancient Maya.
Archaeologists think that the Maya left pottery in caves as part of religious ceremonies.
They would destroy their old pottery, and that's why you find in many caves, you find, actually, instead of finding full pieces of pottery, you find just shards of them, because it was signifying a new era was beginning. That's one of the hypotheses.
Cenotes were believed to be portals to the underworld, and a special sacred tree called the ceiba became a link to the heavens. According to Maya mythology, the ceiba symbolizes the 3 levels of the universe. Its roots reach the underworld in the cenotes. Its trunk represents the middle world, where humans live. And its canopy of branches stretches towards the heavens of the upper world.
It's because of trees like ceiba that have roots that can reach the water table, that this region that has a higher propensity to drought is still lush, and you can still have vegetation.
Cenotes would offer a spiritual dimension and vital water to the Maya living at their new capital city of Mayapan. But now a shocking discovery just outside the city is posing new questions about how cenotes were used. Archaeologist Bradley Russell has been studying Mayapan for 2 decades. He's assembled a team to investigate a cenote called San Jose. The cenote is full of water, so diver Alessandro Riato has been called in and tasked with mapping the site. It's a difficult job.
If you remember last time, there was some problems with gas. There's a level of gas, low oxygen air, just below the entrance to the well here. Be cognizant as you're going down not to lose focus from that.
If I feel uncomfortable for this gas, I will call for people to hold the rope.
Ianisa Ook is the archaeologist who first discovered the site and its dark secret.
The archaeological context is very important. So among the deposits you're going to see, you must not touch them, because they correspond to customs that we're going to study.
This is the first time that this cenote will be fully mapped.
Buena suerte.
Underwater, it's an alien landscape. The water is 15 meters deep, and the cave extends for more than 20 meters in each direction. Alessandro needs to be careful. One misplaced kick could stir up sediment that cuts visibility to zero. On the floor of the cave lies something shocking. Human remains. The skeletons of more than a dozen people.
The big question you ask yourself when you find a deposit like that is, why are these people here? What has happened differently? Were they victims of warfare? Were they sacrificial victims that were thrown in as offerings?
Alessandro will map the layout in detail. The bones are more than 650 years old and provide valuable evidence about the lives of the Maya at the time.
We've been unusually lucky because they're really like time capsules. By getting detailed information about the contents of these deposits, it's almost like decoding a forensic crime scene. You find yourself being able to reconstruct the behaviors and how people came to be buried here.
Alessandro installs lines across the passages and caverns, allowing him to plot out natural features and the 3D space. It takes 10 hours of diving to complete the mapping.
I have all the data. Dry cave, underwater, everything. In the deeper part of the cave, where along my line there are three skull, and then in the other segment, 4 in a line.
Okay, so
it's a massive concentration of dead body down there.
All right, that's really good data for us because that's telling us how the bodies are decomposing over time, things like that. So that's fantastic data.
The team used the sketch alongside digital data to produce an accurate model of the cave. Now, Bradley needs to analyze the findings and figure out why the Maya living at Mayapan threw their dead into this cenote. At the University of Albany in the United States, Bradley Russell and colleague Marilyn Masson are investigating why the Maya disposed of bodies in the San Jose cenote. There are cenotes all around Mayapan.
You know, you got 2, 3 cenotes and nice clusters here, here, here. Well, it's got nice dwelling groups directly associated with them. That suggests they're probably water-bearing, or you wouldn't be building as close to them.
And this is San Jose here.
Right, San Jose here, Saquayum there.
This entire square has almost no houses. It really is as if San Jose is a no man's land.
And look at that big gap there. You can really see there's just nothing around Saquayum. People that stayed away from that cenote for literally millennia now.
So why did the Maya avoid these 2 cenotes? Bradley's team has analyzed skeletons found at Saquayum cenote to find out more about the individuals and how they died.
This is a 3D model of one of the skulls. There doesn't seem to be any indication that violence was the cause of death, which was one of the questions that we were asking ourselves early on, is are these war victims or these sacrificial victims? And we just don't see anything like that.
Instead, Bradley thinks that the people thrown into these cenotes suffered a different but equally tragic fate.
The data we have seems to fit best with the theory that these were victims of some sort of epidemic disease. They needed a space where they could dispose of a lot of bodies rapidly. They were segregating them from the rest of the population by putting them in these specific locations.
The theory explains why the Maya still avoid these particular cenotes to this day.
The Maya themselves talked about pestilences and epidemics in Mayapan's late history and immediately afterward.
Scholars think that a series of droughts around 1350 AD crippled even the cenote-rich Mayapan and coincided with waves of disease. And soon, other crises would hit the city too.
The political system in Mayapan, It was a marked difference from the classic period where you saw a political system that was dedicated to veneration of the king's royal lineage.
Mayapan was founded to mitigate against regional divisions. They brought all the noble houses together from their separate kingdoms. It's a very effective strategy when you're trying to unite a region.
Mayapan decided to do something, have in their town the leaders of all of these different other groups, other towns, come live there, and they could keep an eye on them, control them.
But in reality, one family, called the Kokoms, dominated the alliance, wielding much more control than the next most powerful Shu family.
Mayapan brought together all of these rivals that were vying for power into its governing council, and they negotiated their differences for over 250 years.
Despite this union of great families of the region, the leaders of Mayapan still feared external attack. So they ordered a vast wall built around their city. They constructed the largest city wall in this part of the Americas, 9.1 kilometers long with 7 major gates. Today, only a few ruins remain, but it was a remarkable piece of engineering at its time.
In its day, it was at least 3 meters tall.
The largest city wall anywhere in Mesoamerica. It's got a number of gates with oftentimes defensive features, parapets, and other platforms so that you could shoot down and protect those entrances.
It shows how much the lords of Mayapan were concerned with defense.
The wall kept out intruders, but also kept in the population, ensuring control. And now some experts think that its construction might have exacerbated tension between the dominating Kokom family and the sidelined Shu.
To put in the labor that was required for the state to produce that massive piece of architecture, it might have engendered a lot of hostility or resentment.
Combined with drought and disease, tensions would soon explode.
The Shu took advantage of the fact that things weren't going well.
Archaeologists have found evidence that points to civil war.
We found skeletons that showed signs of violence and had traces of head trauma, probably from face-to-face fighting.
We have a collection of different individuals, different ages, different sexes, all from a location that is associated, we believe, with the Kokom family.
We have evidence of violence, burned buildings that were never rebuilt. We have mass graves in the city where people were chopped up and their remains burned, the effigies of their gods, the ceramic sculptures of their gods smashed.
The famous kind of big event that was the kind of the end of Mayapan was the attack from the Shu family on the Kokom family, where they wiped out essentially all the Kokoms who were present in the city.
Conflict was the final straw for the troubled city. The combination of civil war, drought, and disease was a perfect storm that led to Mayapan's collapse.
There were untold climatic hardships that began in the 1300s and continued into the 1400s. So it endured almost a century of droughts, famines, and pestilences. Whenever you get famine, disease follows.
The city became uninhabitable. Mayapan, the last great Maya capital of the Yucatan Peninsula, was abandoned for good around 1450 AD.
More than 4,000 structures inside the city wall and thousands more outside. Most were just abandoned. Over time, their roofs have fallen in, their walls have collapsed to vegetation, the roots grow in between the stones, it begins to displace things, destabilized, it falls over.
It was the last time in this area that a single Maya city would hold so much power. At the Maya World Museum in Mérida, Mexico, Hugo Toon specializes in the history of the Maya in the Yucatan Peninsula.
When Mayapan was abandoned in 15th century, the Mayan groups, they were divided and they were spread in all the peninsula. Every group was ruled by a king. They were living basically in villages. So they stopped the constructions of big cities. The Mayans, they didn't do that anymore after Mayapan.
Families like the Shu, Kokoms, and others now ruled their own smaller cities. But they still returned to abandoned sacred sites like Chichen Itza.
The population of all the areas around, they continue visiting these places to bring offerings to the ancestors, to the gods, for example.
But there would be no chance for a new capital to reform, because a foreign force was about to arrive. Just 6 decades after Mayapan was abandoned, Spanish conquistadors arrived on Yucatan shores, set on conquering these new territories and wealth for Spain.
The first Spanish explorers going along the coast of Yucatan were very impressed by the cities they saw. They compared one to Cairo. They said it had beautiful stone buildings, that they had markets. So even the coastal cities, which were not as big as their predecessors like Chichen Itza or Mayapan, were impressive to the Spaniards.
The Spanish faced a powerful civilization, but one that the crises of the previous centuries had impacted.
If they had come over 600 years earlier, they would have been facing 10, 11 million Maya. They were facing something much different.
Nevertheless, the complicated alliances and rivalries of the Maya would make conquest difficult.
When the Spaniards arrived to the Maya area, of course, there was different political entities, different ethnic groups, different societies.
This is one reason the Maya were harder to conquer, because the Spaniards couldn't just go find the emperor and take over the government.
But the Spanish could exploit the tension between the kingdoms. At the museum, Hugo Thun is investigating a carving depicting events from 1536, after the Spanish arrival, when the Shu family tried to visit Chichen Itza.
They needed to cross through the land of Kokon family, their worst enemies. The Kokon family, they let them sleep on the territory. But at the night, they were attacked by the warriors. And on this one, you can see how he was killed, an arrow just to his head.
Events like this help explain how the Spanish conquerors prevailed.
And when the conquerors arrived, they took this as a good chance to have an alliance with the Mayan groups that were against the Kokon family.
It took almost 2 centuries for the Spanish crown to conquer the northern Maya lowlands of Yucatan and the Maya highlands. By 1697, just one Maya city held out, Tayasal, in modern-day Guatemala. Archaeologist Luis Gracioso has studied this symbol of Maya resistance. Tayasal is now the island and lakeside city of Flores. On the opposite shore, Louis can overlook the site.
This was the last city to yield to Spanish rule. They made several incursions, tried several times to conquer them, but it was not possible. Many European soldiers were taken prisoner and sacrificed.
Tayasal was a powerful city. Historians estimate that around 25,000 people lived in the city and nearby. It was well fortified and protected by the surrounding water. The Spanish would need allies to win.
At Tayasal, we know that there were about 200 Spaniards, but supported by 3,000 allies. They settled on the shores of the lake and took 12 days to build a ship. A gunboat with over 100 people on board, at least 5 cannons, and then they laid siege to the capital.
Eventually, the last Maya city would fall.
After 12 or 13 days of war, finally, on the 13th of March, 1697, they surrender, and the Spanish crown takes possession of the last Maya stronghold, that is Tayasal.
It was the end of more than 2,000 years of Maya rule, but not the end of the Maya. Today, in the streets of Flores, nothing of the original Maya city of Tayasal remains visible.
The church we have behind us, Our Lady of the Remedies, was built largely with stones that belonged to the structures of Tayasal. Building on ancient temples and replacing them with Catholic churches was a common practice.
The Spanish wanted to convert the Maya, so they found a way to target one crucial source of their religious knowledge. In Mexico City, Baltazar Brito Guadarrama is the director of the National Library of Anthropology and History. The country's most important historical books are stored and studied here, including a rare copy of a Maya book known as a codex.
Well, this book is the Dresden Codex. Codices are very important to the Maya people because they recorded all the most important aspects of their culture. They contain astronomical, mathematical, and religious information.
Today, only 4 original examples of these priceless books remain.
This specific edition is very important to us because the original was damaged. And it's because of this edition that we can see the codex as it was during the 19th century. For example, it can tell us that after 236 days, Venus will appear and bring a beneficial or disastrous omen. And then, based on this, the town's community was preparing, for example, for a drought or for a war.
This codex was written by the Maya in the 11th or 12th centuries. It's a direct link with the ancient Maya civilization.
When you have the possibility of analyzing a manuscript of this type, you are somehow allowing those ancient voices to have a presence for today's Maya peoples. Because they are, without a doubt, an example of their culture and of all the historical and cultural significance that these people had for humanity.
Codices like this were passed down from generation to generation, but many would be destroyed.
After the arrival of the Spanish, the codices were considered to have heretical and diabolical content. And in the middle of the 16th century, Father Landa collected a large amount of documents that he found and burned most of them.
It was an attempt by the Spanish to wipe out Maya culture and replace it with their own religion and worldview. Fortunately, some codices were hidden, allowing historians to learn from Maya who lived before the conquest, in their own words. Now, an incredible discovery is exposing the lengths to which the Maya went to protect their culture and traditions. In the Maya highlands of Guatemala is the city of Xajul. Archaeologist Victor Castillo wants to examine a discovery made at the 16th century home of Don Lucas.
Don Lucas, hello.
How are you, Victor?
During restoration work, Don Lucas discovered a series of centuries-old Maya paintings.
When we changed the ceiling and the dead wood was removed, a piece of stucco fell down here, and I could see that there were paintings underneath.
The images show scenes of Maya life and customs.
We have a really exceptional scene here because we have a group of musicians who used to perform for the parties and the dances. It's interesting because we can even see very specific details like the musicians' fingers when they pick up the instruments. And then we have an extravagantly dressed dancer in a bird pattern on this side. It's a unique scene. We can almost hear the Maya musicians playing these 200-year-old instruments and more.
A Maya artist painted these during Spanish occupation, before hiding them from the colonists under layers of plaster.
There are examples of the Spanish Empire trying to eliminate or erase certain elements of a tradition, especially those related to religion. In the case of dances, we have historical documents showing how the church and the civil authorities tried to suppress some pre-colonial dances.
Despite colonization and the catastrophic loss of some 90% of the Maya population from violence and new diseases brought by the Spanish, the Maya were able to retain many of their traditions. Today, more than 8 million Maya still live across their traditional lands, speaking almost 30 distinct Maya languages. Guatemala is home to the majority of the Maya peoples today. More than 40% of the population identify as Maya. From the Guatemalan Maya highlands in the south to the lowlands as far as the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Maya culture, like the ritual bull game, persists.
Personally, I've been playing for 13 years. It has a lot to do with our past heritage and our culture today. When you get involved in the game, everything around you disappears, and you concentrate and feel the spirit of your ancestors. You feel like you're reliving that past.
The Maya today are the descendants of a remarkable civilization that can trace its roots back some 3,000 years.
They keep their culture, they keep their beliefs, their costumes, and a lot of things we know right now is because they preserve them from generation to generation until now.
It's incredible to be able to document these people's lives and to return that information to their descendants. The people who live in that area today are direct descendants of the people who are at Mayapan. The names of the families are the same.
The language is alive, the traditions in the villages, and that's really important to know because the Mayan people, they stood here, they still alive, and the traditions, the art too. We are feeling very proud about that, where we came from.